All right, welcome to NCSA Live. My name is Kyle Winters. I'm filling in for Danny Koenig today. I'm one of the recruiting managers here at NCSA, and I am joined today by senior recruiting coordinator and mentor, Phil Wells. Phil, how you doing?
Hey, Kyle, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here with the Facebook Live here today. Make sure we can go over a lot of the good updates and, obviously just make sure we know what to look for when getting that college tuition paid for.
100%. And this will be the first time that we've ever done NCSA Live together, so I'm pretty excited about that. We haven't actually seen each other for probably about 7 months since the quarantine. So it's great to see your face again. It's great to be talking with you again.
Certainly happy for any opportunity to really connect now that we've kind of seen the turn in the world. But, hey, we got to keep on pushing. So I'm certainly happy to be here.
100%. And we're coming to you guys live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. If you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We'll answer all those questions at the end. But we have a pretty unique topic today that we've probably covered in a little bit of detail before, but never in as much detail as this, I don't think. But we're going to be breaking down financial aid terminology. And a couple of things that we're going to talk through are the different types of financial aid that exist out there and how to utilize those. What is and what does calculated cost mean? We're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. What is FAFSA, something that everybody should know as they're applying for college. And then obviously, again, we're going to go over a live Q&A at the end. So a great place to start is really just kind of breaking down the different types of financial aid. And so, Phil, if you want to kind of walk us through what are the different types of financial aid that exist out there?
Yeah, well, first I want to start off with, your athletic scholarships. We're all student athletes at this point, and it should be a familiar term between athletic scholarships. And just generally speaking, we'll dive into a couple points surrounding it. But you also have different kinds of aid where it will come directly from your FAFSA, where it can be in a form of a grant or a merit. Then on the other side, we can also look at some loans where, typically it can help us out now and we'll have to pay a little bit of interest on it, a little bit later in the future. But really just starting off with, our athletic scholarships. And this is a popular topic. It's where, hey, we're busting our butt in the classroom, we're busting our butt in our given sport, and we get recognized for it. We get some kind of funding typically that we don't have to pay back. And it's where typically, it's going to cover direct portions of our tuition. It can be partials or it can be the full thing between helping us really accomplish our goals to playing that sport at that college, but also making sure that, again, we can take care of everything academically and be comfortable doing so, not worrying about that tuition.
Yeah, and athletic scholarships, they're a huge aspect of just recruiting. And really in our day-to-day, we're talking with hundreds, thousands of student athletes, and all those families typically are looking for some type of athletic scholarship as well. And you touched on it between the differences of full scholarships and partial scholarships. That's one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that you're going to get a full ride scholarship for your sport. There's really only 6 sports where full ride scholarships from an athletic standpoint come into play. That's football, men's and women's basketball, women's gymnastics, tennis, and volleyball. The vast majority of other sports, you're going to have what's called a stacked scholarship, where it's going to take into account both an athletic scholarship and an academic scholarship, in some case, a merit-based scholarship. Phil, if you want to touch on that a little bit more, just kind of the additions and the differences between a full athletic scholarship and a stacked scholarship.
Yeah, so when it comes to a full athletic scholarship, just like Kyle touched on, it's directly there in the definition for us, full. So typically as a student athlete, all of our expenses are covered. Okay, we're going into college with a bit of a safety net, and everything is going to be heavily relied on between the admissions department at that school as well as, your coaching staff. Now, when we look outside of, that full scholarship, which is typically what a lot of student athletes shoot for, it's ideal. But outside of it, we do have, some instances where, we have really good students. A college coach may offer a partial scholarship, say it's 25%. We may look upon academics to cover that additional 75%. And that's where it comes to the point of stacking, really leveraging a little bit of academic money in terms of scholarship aid, as well as athletic money and scholarship aid. And that's really one of the great ways to get a lot of our tuition covered if initially we're not able to get everything fully funded from one avenue. we can look at multiple. And one thing to note there, Kyle, I wanted to inform you or bring it up to the point here. As of August 1st, the Division I Council agreed upon really allowing more kids to stack on more money academically for need-based funding on top of athletic scholarships, so everything wouldn't really count towards the athletic scholarship dollar amount. Now, within that, that just gives us more opportunities as student athletes to get additional funding. That's a result of the pandemic. Kyle, if you want to touch on that a little bit, between how we've kind of been impacted, how we've seen that student athletes are able to maybe get a little bit more funding out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to applications for the school, connection with the college coach. If the coach really wants you to come to the program, they're going to find a way to get you more money. And that's where we can talk more about aspects like merit aid, which is going to be financial aid awarded to student athletes for their personal achievements. So if you're doing stuff outside of sports, outside of school, coaches and admissions departments are able to get you additional merit aid. So there's a lot of ways. One other way you touched on previously were grants, which is a gift aid. Grants are need-based financial aid that students are not required to pay back. So it's essentially a gift from the U.S. Department of Education that is money for you to utilize towards your education. I didn't go to college for 4 years, but I took some classes after my baseball career, and I actually had some Pell Grants that I was able to utilize towards my education as well. And we can really separate those grants from loans, which probably most people who've gone to college or have dealt with someone going to college are pretty familiar with the idea of student loans, which is obviously a loan from the government through the school that you're going to have to pay it back over a course of time. And that's why all these steps we're going to talk about when it comes to recruiting are so huge, to minimize the loans that you're taking out and you have to pay back over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years in some people's cases. Phil, if you want to touch more on loans, I'm sure that could be very helpful as well.
Yeah, and I would say amongst the loans, it's important to, always, really look at the different package that we may receive, because sometimes a certain package can really entail a little bit of scholarship aid from athletics. It can entail a little bit of scholarship aid from academics or general need-based. And then we can also have a loan on top of that. So we want to look at all avenues, because if we're only able to, carry out 50% of a scholarship for a given student athlete, then it becomes super important that, we look at different loans and see how we can get this, or the rest of our tuition covered in a meaningful way where we're not paying a whole lot in the back end once we do graduate. And that definitely kind of brings us to the point of, looking at those costs, right? We have different terminology that we break down when it comes to the factors of, our calculated costs, what actually the tuition looks like if we need to get on a payment plan. And really it's different terminology for the cost that we will have to pay is termed specifically that cost after all of our loans and all of our given aid is applied. Did you want to touch on that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So that would be the calculated cost, which is the cost of attendance. And we're talking about cost after aid, so the net price, not the gross price that you're paying. Obviously, that gets pretty far into detail. You guys can think about it like your taxes. That's why we have people that we work with that help out with a lot of those aspects as far as like applying for grants and aid and figuring out how much you're going to pay. The other big factor that comes into play with figuring out how much you're going to be paying, how much you're going to need to take out loans, how much grant money you can expect is the expected family contribution, or EFC. There's actually a lot of sites out there that can help you calculate an expected family contribution. There's a lot of information on our website about the EFC as well that can link to that. But what that is essentially what the school takes into account a family's how much money they made in the year previous, their annual income from the year previous, and they're able to utilize that to determine how much is going to come out of pocket from that family if they were to go to that school in the incoming year. So again, it's a very complicated process. It's a lot about entering your money. It's like paying taxes in the sense that you have to enter a lot of that information to figure that out. But that's going to be a huge factor in calculating your cost of how much you're going to be paying, how much loan money you can get, how much grant money you can get. Again, another aspect that just really belies why you should get started with these things early, because there's a lot of moving parts, even when we're not talking about the athletic side of the recruiting process.
Yeah, and I would definitely say this is a part of the recruiting process that's, not super glorious. It's not fun, looking at any bill, but when it comes to the huge tuition prices, obviously it's not fun, but it's a part of the process, and it's a part of student athletes finding success and being comfortable at their given institution. Now, when we look at everything entitled between loans, EFCs, that, we typically have to pay attention to, the best overall practice, and Kyle, I think you mentioned it early on, is the FAFSA, making sure we can get a head start on that stuff, making sure that, we can get first in line, because typically this is funding that we can apply directly to our institution that we will not have to pay back. But because it is funding usually that we don't have to pay back, we need to get first in line. We need to get a jump start. And you'll be able to find a direct link in our website to make sure you can get to the FAFSA form. But typically, as you guys can see, it's the free application, hence free, for federal student aid. So this is where we will apply. We will include, our family background. We will include our certain statuses that will help us out with college. And then hence, from that FAFSA form, we'll be given a package of aid that we may or may not have to pay back. Most times, again, it's going to be what we can receive. That's, not something we have to pay back. And then they'll oftentimes give you a couple options with loans that we can choose to accept if we see a good fit for them.
Absolutely. And a lot of people have a misconception that applying for the FAFSA, applying for the NCAA Eligibility Center, that applying for the school in some cases, that's really the start of the recruiting process. It's definitely worth us noting that these are just steps that are later on into the recruiting process. These are a little bit more on the academic side of things that don't necessarily have to do with getting recruited. College coaches, they're identifying prospects, they're communicating with their prospects, they're having conversations, they're offering scholarships. They're taking a lot of these steps well before student athletes are applying for the FAFSA, or well before they're applying for the school or registering with the NCAA Eligibility Center. So I want to make sure you guys understand that there's a lot of steps that we should be taking as recruits before we're ever leading up to the FAFSA, before we're ever applying to the school. And that's really a big part of what we talk about in addition to a lot of this. And Phil, you're one of our most senior recruiting coordinators, one of our mentors. You can probably speak about it as well as anyone as far as what steps a student athlete should be taking leading up to the FAFSA, leading up to a lot of these applications.
Yeah, and I like that you alluded to it, because there is a lot of steps we want to take, before even looking at FAFSA and before looking at a lot of the application processes when it comes to getting to college. And of course, that's as athletes, as student athletes. And some of those steps entail just making sure we're on track. It goes without saying that, when it comes to the recruiting process, we want to make sure we're on the radar. We want to make sure college coaches know how we've been performing, in our experience. And that's just not in our sport, but also in the classroom. And one of the great practices that we don't see enough is when we are knee deep in a process, we've maybe communicated with a couple programs, a couple colleges, open that dialogue between the financial aid process. If we're to that point where we're an upperclassman and we're maybe narrowing down the list while still looking at opportunities, if we're engaged with any college coaches, more times than not, these coaches, they have a very fine, direct line that affiliates right into the admissions department of these colleges. So open that dialogue. If you're having some trouble, open that dialogue to that coach. Maybe they can help out with, a certain or extending a certain direction to tackle some aid. If it's an institution where, Kyle, like you mentioned before, where we're looking at merit scholarship, then that may need to go through the coach. We may need to open that dialogue, and if not, that coach may be able to point us in the right direction of who we do need to contact at the institution. Of course, assuming we may have some trouble.
100%. And for a coach, it's going to be a process. It's not going to be as simple as all of a sudden junior year, they find out who you are, they think you're a good prospect, and all of a sudden they want to go to bat for you and find a bunch of scholarship money and help you out with the admissions department and help you through the FAFSA process and help you figuring out your expected family contribution. It's really quite the opposite. These coaches have been identifying prospects online. We're very partial, obviously, to the NCSA profile, but it really has everything these college coaches are going to need to identify you as a freshman and follow your progress over the next 3 years to the point where you're leading up to this FAFSA and going through this application process. And hopefully you've built a good enough relationship with those coaches over the last 2-3 years, and they're excited about you. They want to help you through the process. They want to make everything easier for you coming into school. I know that was my process. I had full ride scholarship, academic and athletic, to play baseball in college. And I really don't necessarily remember the application process because the coaches helped me out with it. They took care of it in a lot of cases. And that's the great benefit of being an athlete, is you get a lot of help with these things. They're going to cater towards you, making this an easier process. So don't wait until you're applying. Don't wait until you're filling out the FAFSA to start trying to get recruited. Start taking those steps freshman year, putting together a profile, working on video, being proactive to get your name out to coaches, and trying to build relationships over the course of 4 years to make sure you're in a good spot. So hopefully by the time senior year comes around, you're doing a victory lap. You've already figured it out. By the time the fall of senior year comes up, you're already done with the recruiting process.
Absolutely. And that's worth reiterating as well. We want senior year to be a victory lap. We don't want to be chasing around opportunities, and we don't want to be chasing around, just getting used to what FAFSA means. We don't want to really start looking up the definitions to these terms as a senior, because at that point we're scrambling. Okay, we want it to be a nice transition to, ending high school with a bang, and we want to make sure that's a victory lap so we can, find our best fit program. And in summary, when we take a look at the entire aspect of the recruiting process, the biggest component outside of, making sure our grades are intact and outside of making sure we're performing and coaches know about it, we got to make sure to find the best fit program. We clearly can define the definitions of, what an athletic scholarship looks like, what a loan entails, do we have to pay it back, what a grant is, who offers merit scholarship opportunities. We need to know these factors because that's going to play a pivotal role in, again, just making sure we can find that best fit, making sure as a student athlete we're comfortable at the institution that we select.
100%. The more you know, because knowledge is power. Awesome. So I think we have some questions hopefully rolling in here. If they're about this topic or anything else, feel free to throw them in there and we'll handle them in suit. So we have Chastity Rodriguez, first question. What should I do to get my name out there? I'm a volleyball player. So Phil, if you want to, again, take away with that, go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of context there. It's a lot of different variables between, grad year, how you're currently performing. But the easiest way to tackle it is, really no matter where you're at in grad years, to realize, hey, what kind of athlete are you? What kind of programs am I best suited for between academics as well as time performing on the court? And as it pertains to volleyball, it's one of those sports where, women's volleyball has a lot of opportunities out there, and almost, I would say almost the most out of college programs. So you have to start reaching out to coaches. You have to start sending out some emails to make sure those coaches at least know about you. And the rest of the recruiting process will be about engagement. But you got to get yourself on the radar by proactively reaching out to college programs.
100%. Yeah, volleyball is one of the most competitive sports out there. I think at the collegiate level, only about 3% of high school athletes go on to play at the collegiate level. So for volleyball, it's all about getting out ahead of everybody else, being proactive, getting more visibility. I'm sure you guys have been to club tournaments. You've seen that there's hundreds of teams out there. There's thousands of players, and it can be easy for a coach to get lost out there. They're going out there watching who they know they want to watch beforehand, rather than just going out there and hoping they see good prospects. So do your work before you go out to club tournaments. Awesome. Jose has asked, do players who play on club teams at four-year schools get scouted? So Jose, I assume you're asking about playing on the club team at a college, at a university. That's what I'm going to go with. So for some sports like lacrosse or hockey, that can be the case where as a senior in high school, they will recruit you to come play at that club program. For the most part, in all of those other sports, not so much. It's going to be much more you go to that school and then you go try out for the club program. It's going to be much less of a recruiting process to try to play club at the collegiate level as opposed to playing with a like Division I affiliated team or Division II affiliated team that's run through the university. Christy Simon asks, how much influence does a coach have when it comes to academic scholarship money? Phil, if you want to take that.
Yeah, I would say first it depends on the academic program. If it's one of our Ivy Leagues or one of those, private institutions with high academics, a coach may have a little bit, more power than, we would all think. But the general answer is, they still have a lot of power. When it comes to bringing these kids in on different kinds of scholarships and just roster spots as a whole, a college coach has to work hand in hand with the admissions department to make sure that, hey, they're not just telling them, hey, we got a good athlete and they're coming into our program. But we still, as a college coach, have to make sure the grades are there academically for a GPA. We have to make sure the test score is suitable. We have to make sure that the sole primary person that or reason that this kid is showing up on our campus, which is to get an education, you have to make sure that's satisfied. So the answer being, college coaches have a lot of power. Again, in terms of our private institutions and our highly accelerated programs when it comes to academics, we're going to probably show even more power, but always open a dialogue with a college coach, even on the academic side, because, again, they hold a lot of power when it comes to decisions being made.
Yeah, it'll definitely depend school by school. I have a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, who played softball at Georgetown University, and obviously that's a very high academic school, so they really didn't have a ton of academic scholarship money to give out because everybody at the school was someone who was a high academic student. So a lot of factors that go into that, but good question. Roger Gonzalez asked, do you see the pandemic affecting financial aid funds for the next few years? I understood that college players were going to get an extra year to make up for the year they missed. And he's speaking specifically about softball. And yeah, that definitely is the case that for sports like softball, most student athletes have been granted an extra year to come back and play. Some schools are not allowing them to, some are. Some student athletes are deciding to come back, some aren't. But Phil talked about this earlier, that as a response to COVID-19, the NCAA Division I Council adopted new legislation that loosened some of the regulation around need-based aid and academic scholarship being awarded to student athletes. What that means is that schools, coaches, they're going to have more freedom to offer and give out merit-based aid and scholarships to student athletes who are coming into the program. So again, it's hard to say how that's going to work out specifically for each individual school and program, but there will be more flexibility. It's going to be about communication with your coach to figure out how that's going to work best for you guys. Cindy asks, when can you contact a coach, or do you wait for the coach to contact you? Huge misconception here that we see quite a bit from Cindy. Phil, if you want to take that.
Yeah, so the misconception relies upon, athletes thinking that college coaches, do proactively just reach out, and they do, but we want to get after it first. We want to be proactive. We want to be the ones initiating contact, and hence that's going to, really extend to that college coach that, hey, this kid is showing some initiative here. Let's take a little bit more of a keen look at what they're capable of. Now, in terms of a timeline, we have different rules set up between when a college coach can reach out to an athlete. There's a very time structure behind it. Most of it in terms of phone calls and personalized contact being after sophomore year. But for the athlete, not the case. Okay, what we recommend is, at the age of 13, when you become an NCAA eligible recruit, this is the time where you need to first start reaching out to coaches. And that doesn't necessarily mean, I'm a freshman, I'm 13, I need to call a coach, via phone. But that does mean that we need to start getting the ball moving between, maybe filling out some questionnaires, maybe sending out some emails, just saying that we may be interested in the program. The earlier we can start reaching out, getting those coaches to know who we are, the earlier, the better when it comes to potential opportunities we may receive in the long run.
Yeah, you nailed it, Phil. It's really the old school mentality for a student athlete to think, if I'm good enough, college coaches will find me. I know that was my mentality when I was going through the recruiting process. I have two younger sisters, and we slowly figured that out over the course of about 15 years, that it's really not the case. Like, I played professional baseball. I was a Division I recruit. My middle sister was a Division I 4-year starter. My youngest sister plays at a junior college as well. And none of us were found by a college coach. None of us just happened to be seen by a college coach, especially for my younger sisters. they had to be very proactive in reaching out and trying to connect themselves with college coaches. I was found in the sense that I was at the very right place at the right time and did incredibly well. So lightning kind of struck, fortunately enough for me, but for the vast majority of student athletes, that doesn't happen. There are thousands of student athletes every year who are good enough and smart enough and don't get recruited just for the sheer fact the coaches don't even know who they are. So don't wait for coaches to find you. Definitely be the aggressor and get your name out to those coaches. Cool. Steven asks, what if you're getting a late start, like starting their senior year? So it sounds like Steven's getting a little bit later start with recruiting going into senior year. Definitely not uncommon. Definitely something we've seen quite a bit in our time here. Phil, if you have some recommendations for seniors on how to get caught up.
Absolutely. No hope is not lost. We're starting, and that's the main concept. We're starting. Now we just need to be robust. Okay. As a senior, we need to realize that, of course, we're behind in reference to, other athletes who've already may have started to reach out to coaches and take steps in recruiting early on. But as a senior, we need to really just have a robust game plan to start reaching out to coaches. And it's going to be very pivotal at that point that we have a narrowed down reach. Okay. And what I mean by that is, as a senior, oftentimes, athletes reach out to college programs who are no longer looking at seniors, or they may be reaching out to a program in, again, a given sport where they're no longer recruiting that position. So when we're reaching out to a college coach as a senior, again, looking to play ball in college or a given sport next year, then it has to be imperative that when we're reaching out to these programs, we can do a little bit of research through NCSA, through that school's website to figure out, hey, what do their current roster spots look like? How many current seniors are they still recruiting? Or who's on their current roster? We need to pay attention to those things because it becomes very time sensitive as a senior going through the process and trying to get on the radar. So we want to at least have a little bit of a narrowed down approach with some research behind it.
100%. Like we'll take a couple more questions and we'll kind of finish up with some commitments here. But Shakia asks or just states, just to clarify, you're saying that a student athlete can have both a sports and academic scholarship. Yeah, Shakia, it's exactly the case. And most often that will be the case for a student athlete. If they have any sort of athletic scholarship money, they're going to have academic scholarship money as well. There are certain circumstances where schools will not allow you to stack scholarships. So some Division II schools do not allow you to have both an athletic and an academic scholarship. They will offer you one or the other or both, and you can choose one or the other, but you're not able to have both. That's rare, doesn't come up a lot. Those coaches will definitely over-communicate that with you. But other than the 6 sports we mentioned before, football, men's and women's basketball, gymnastics, volleyball, I think those were the top few, maybe hockey, I think was in there as well, women's hockey. It's going to be a combination of athletic and academic scholarships almost 100% of the time. Cool. And the last question here, and I'll kick this to you, Phil. John Trulish asks, his swimmer daughter has a 4.5 GPA, has swim times in line for the school she's looking at. Should we look into academic or swim scholarship first? Phil, if you want to handle that.
Well, it's just important to realize, again, we're going to the program to get our degree. We're going to get our education. So we definitely want to make sure all bases are covered when it comes to, again, our grades, our test scores, and it sounds like things are aligned in this specific scenario or for your student athlete. So in that case, you want to communicate with the college coaches at those programs to see, if you can get first in line and they can recommend any other academic endeavors that you may qualify for. So in that case, I would communicate with the coach in terms of just getting some direction. Okay, because if what you're saying, a good fit for those programs based off swim times, based off test scores and a really good GPA, then college coaches should already hold you at a high favor at those programs, unless they don't know about you. So reaching out to those college coaches, again, you want to make sure that you can get a little bit of direction between, what they're going to be willing to provide, as well as what the academic admissions department is willing to provide. And in that approach, I would directly go through the coach as a first attempt. Now, if we don't really get the correspondence we want right away, then we can follow up again with the admissions department in that specific institution.
Yeah, in a sport like swimming, there really isn't a plethora of athletic scholarships. They're going to have limitations on how many athletic scholarships they can hand out. So I would definitely try to connect those coaches as early as possible to max out as much athletic scholarship money as you possibly can. But like Phil said, if you're connecting with that coach, you guys are building a relationship, they're going to try and figure out the best plan for you. But great questions by everyone today. Appreciate you guys reaching out to us. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to us at live@ncsasports.org. If you have other thoughts or concerns around FAFSA, check out our website, ncsasports.org, and we have a lot of information there. Or you can reach out to Phil or myself directly, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions we didn't get to during the time today. But we'll kick it to our last segment, which we do every week, and it's becoming one of my favorite segments, but we're going to go through our commitments for the week. So we have 3 student athletes who recently committed. Phil, I'll let you lead us off.
Absolutely. Well, as you guys can see, we have Abigail Peterson going over to Stevenson University. Nice photo coming off a bat. Again, really excited for Abigail. And again, just to remind everyone, these are student athletes who have obviously been through some adversity this year. These are student athletes who have achieved their academic and athletic goals to find the best fit program. So we hope this for everybody, and we want to give a huge congratulations starting out with Abigail.
Awesome. Our next commit today is Allie Rauscher. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Allie. But Allie's committed to William Penn University, lacrosse player. Looks like she probably tears it up on the field. So congrats to you, Allie. Best of luck to you moving forward these coming years at William Penn.
Then last but not least, we have Brian Green. Again, pretty nice look there. Looks like he's ready for action to get back on the field there. But we got him going over to University of California at Davis. Solid program. Really excited for you, Brian, and huge congratulations taking a week to commit to the program.
Absolutely. UC Davis, great baseball program. So awesome. Thanks again for everyone for all the questions that you guys had this week. Next week, it will be back with me and David Kamisic, barring any sort of tragedy. But we'll be going over the fall recruiting checklist. This is a huge time in the recruiting process for the fall sports, but also for the spring sports with what college coaches are doing to prepare for the upcoming spring sports as well, knowing they're putting together their recruiting lists and who they're going to be going watching in person, assuming that 2021 is going to be a little bit more open for in-person recruiting. But Phil, anything that you have to add before we close it out today?
I think that'll cover it. It's definitely a really important topic that we covered amongst financial aid. Some of the terminology behind it. I encourage everybody to make sure you guys are doing some keen research. And even if we're not, taking that specific action just yet between, filling out FAFSA, what if we're underclassmen? We don't really necessarily need to fill it out. But no matter where you're at in the recruiting process, I challenge everybody, especially after the segment here, dive in, educate yourself, go to the NCSA website, get a little bit more in tune, because when that time does roll around where we need to really implement a lot of these tactics, you want to be well educated.
Awesome. Great points. It was a pleasure doing this with you for the first time today, Phil. I hope we get to do it again here in the near future. Hopefully we get to see each other again here in the near future. But go ahead.
I'll say not a hope at all, Kyle. We will do it again, and we will really soon.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thanks again, everybody, for the questions. We'll see you guys again next week.